I turned first to the Tetrarchus Herodias, knowing that she, a woman of the world, would understand me better than her husband and would help me with her influence. Tetrarchus, I began after we had exchanged greetings, in the Roman galleys which traverse the great sea, we have, chained to the oars, not a few of your subjects. In our circuses and theatres, hundreds of them have been thrown to the beasts. Your tetrarchate furnishes us with more rebels, insurgents, religious disturbers of the peace, and leaders of robber bands than the entire province of Syria. Your subjects cause us more concern than all of Egypt, with its great centre of Alexandria. Every day we hear of new insurrections in Galilee. This matter has been mentioned more than once by the proconsul in Antioch and at the court of the Caesar. I tell you, as your friend Tetrarchus, that these repeated disturbances do the reputation of the Tetrarch no good in the eyes of the Caesar. The less so since your brother, the one pretender to the throne of Judea, Agrippa, the friend of the imperial heirs, has returned to Italy, stays close to the Caesar on Capri, and intrigues against you. I can assure you further that the standing of the pretender has risen considerably of late, and however extravagant he may be, there is no lack of such as will lend him new money, while the old creditors have become much more patient. Do you know why? Because his prospects of becoming king of a united Palestine are by no means to be ignored. There are some who expect them to be realized even during the life of Tiberius. I take the liberty of pointing out to you, Tetrarchus, that it is high time for you to prove to the proconsul at Antioch and the Caesar in Rome that you are able and willing to suppress every insurrection at its beginning and to tear out by the roots every attempt at rebellion which appears in your territories. The Tetrarchess did not wait to hear more. She took me by the hand and conducted me to the Tetrarch. "But, Hegemon, what has happened?" he asked me when I had repeated for his benefit the warning delivered to the Tetrarchess. His face had blenched. "Tetrarch," I answered, "I have just come from Capharnaum, where I spent some weeks as the guest of the centurion. It has no doubt reached the ears of the Tetrarch that in Capharnaum there has appeared an extraordinary man who has won a great following among the people by the wonders he has performed. I have had the opportunity to become acquainted with the activities of this man on the shores of Gennesaret and to listen to the doctrine which he preaches. I have come to the conclusion that this man represents a great danger to the state and to the ruling order, and the sooner the Tetrarch puts an end to his destructive activities, the better. But what he teaches is also directed against the accepted laws, customs, and traditions of your own religion. I understand that his doctrinal utterances have aroused the bitterest hostility among your scholars and interpreters of the law. I would counsel you most earnestly, Tetrarch, to put an end to the threatening work of this most dangerous person, for he stirs up the people against labor and obedience and corrupts them with promises of a kingdom in heaven. And I have learned for myself that his power has begun to extend beyond the ignorant masses to high-placed individuals whose peculiar natures makes them susceptible to visions and illusions. I urge immediate action if you are not to come too late." The pallor deepened on the Tetrarch's face. He had to lie down on a couch which slaves brought into the garden where the conversation was being held. He held his head in his hands for a long time, then he lifted it up, looked straight at me, and exclaimed, "Over that man I have no power, and none of us has any power over him, Hegemon." "What do you mean, Tetrarch?" I asked, astounded. "I have already beheaded him, have I not? And he has returned to life," he cried, and he trembled visibly with fear. "I do not understand you, Tetrarch," I said, and turned my astonished gaze on the Tetrarchess, who had become pale at her husband's words. For the Tetrarch made the impression of a man who had lost his reason. He stared blankly into space, and he shook from head to foot. You were present, he went on with chattering teeth, when the German soldiers went down into the cellars of the fortress and returned with his head on a silver platter, which they placed before little Salome. You mean Yochanan, whom they called the Baptist? Why, yes, this is he. This is Yochanan the Baptist, who has risen from death and brings the message of repentance and the kingdom of heaven to the people. I closed his mouth once, and now he speaks again. I have no power over him. Hegemon, I cannot behead a beheaded man. But Tetrarch, these are wild fantasies and empty dreams born in the imagination of the people. How can you give them credence? Hegemon, our people have only dreams and fantasies. Everything else has been taken away from them. What harm can the reality of your power suffer from dreams and fantasies which this man propagates among the poor? And what threat issues to the glory of Rome from a kingdom established in heaven? Is Rome jealous of treasures in heaven? And with this question he rose and left us. Leave this in my hands, Hegemon, the Tetrarchess said soothingly. Never fear, it will be properly seen to. The Tetrarch has been affected by the stories circulating among the common folk concerning this man, and he has not been able to sleep of nights. He will recover his peace of mind before long, and the business will be disposed of to your and our satisfaction. Hardly any better was the reply of old Hanan in Jerusalem when I laid the problem before him. The conversation took place in the hall of columns of his magnificent home, over a beaker of rich, tasty wine fermented from the juice of Jericho dates, a delicious beverage which I had never found anywhere else than in the high priest's house. I gave him the full story of my encounter with the strange man of Kfar Nahum, of the miracles he performed and the corrupting doctrines which he spread among the ignorant masses. I did not fail to exert on my listener the kind of pressure I had exerted on the Tetrarch. I told him flatly that if Caesarea got wind of the dangerous public state of mind which the man's doctrines had created, there might be uncomfortable consequences for the high priests and the other local powers in Jerusalem. I observed then, as I observe now, that what astonishes me in you Jews is the sensitive jealousy which you display over the most trivial detail of your ritual and tradition when one of us strangers comes too near, while you leave your own preachers and interpreters to make a general assault on the foundations of your faith. The old man listened with close attention, passing his fingers down the length of his white beard, tugging gently at his earlocks, caressing his majestic side whiskers, all very thoughtfully and comfortably as his manner was, while an expression of contempt flickered at the corners of his mouth. Then he answered, "Idle dreams, Hegemon, idle dreams. Nothing to grow hot at while the danger is so remote. Our people cannot live without dreams, Hegemon, and in every generation it must have its dreamer, one who will play sweet melodies to it and put it to sleep. From the time of our father Abraham on, our people has been living more on promises than on fulfillments. I doubt whether it even desires to give reality to its dreams. It is probably afraid of the test. It dreads to have the wings of its dreams clipped by the steel of reality. He who puts off to the remotest future the day of their deliverance, who transports to the remotest heavens the scene of their final happiness, wins their attention. Now, as to the doctrine which you speak of, Hegemon, we are a strange people. Every one of us is his own Moses and law interpreter. In this respect, we cannot be compared with the disciplined nations which accept and implicitly obey a fixed code. When it comes to interpretation of the law, we are independent. Every one of us has the right to interpret according to his own light, as long as the interpretation remains within the framework and spirit of the accepted doctrine. But the framework is such that there is no limit to the varieties of interpretation which it can enclose, for the spirit is not the spirit of this world. Among us it may happen, without warning, without rhyme or reason, that a man will arise from the plough, or from tending sheep, or from baking pots, or from serving in the temple, and declare that he has been sent of God. Yesterday no one knew him, and today he is the accepted prophet to whose words we must listen. Our task is only to investigate and test whether he has really been sent of God. To that end, we have certain signs and general rules indicated in our scriptures, whereby we may know whether his words are in the spirit of our doctrine, whether he strengthens our hands and our faith in God, or whether he weakens them. On this man, too, concerning whom you have told me, we are keeping our eyes. We are investigating even now. We take note of every word and act, and you have my assurance that, for the time being, there is nothing to be alarmed at. All that I have heard of him so far consists, as I have said, of empty dreams, and should he really become a danger to our faith, which I do not believe will happen, then you may be certain that we shall know as well how to deal with him as we have known how to deal with others in the past. Yes, I know that you keep careful watch over him. I encountered in Capharnaum your agent, your trusted emissary. He has even become one of the disciples, and, if I am not mistaken, one of the most important. I have heard that it is he who is entrusted with the funds of the fellowship. My agent? My emissary? I know of no such man. I stared at the high priest, dumbfounded. The smile still flickered in the corners of his mouth, and I could not determine its meaning. Was he laughing secretly at me, or was it a smile of self-satisfaction or omniscience? Judah Ishkariot, the man I often saw seated near the entrance to your inner court, I urged. Judah Ishkariot? No, I am not acquainted with the name, the high priest insisted. It must be a mistake on your part, Hegemon. In any case, as regards the man's preaching, we are now prepared to send up from Jerusalem a commission of scribes and scholars to establish formally whether his utterances are as dangerous to our faith as you seem to fear. I should very much like to know the results of their investigation, High Priest. Ah, that, my dear Hegemon, that is a purely internal religious matter, and you know the jealousy of our people in regard to this point. It would appear, I said dryly, that your prophet of Nazareth must be very deeply implicated in anti-Roman conspiracy if even you, High Priest, whom we consider a friend, think it necessary to conceal the outcome from us. Oh, believe me, Hegemon, that this whole affair of the prophet of Nazareth is not worth the attention and trouble you devote to it. If we were to take seriously all the prophets and messiahs, all the teachers and dreamers who rise in our midst, we should have to give them every hour of our time to the complete neglect of serious business. We should forever be fighting with shadows. The best specific for messiahs and prophets is to let them shout themselves out, let them choke and struggle with their own lunacy until they become weary of themselves or their followers become weary of them. The moment you begin to persecute one of them, you make a martyr of him, and he is transformed in the eyes of the people into a saint. Leave all this to us, Hegemon. We have had much experience. This is a land of prophets and messiahs, and we have long ago discovered that the wisest course is to let them have their say. And as to the prophet of Galilee, who causes you so much concern, be certain that if the investigation, which will be carried out with the help of the opposition, that is, of the Pharisees, should reveal any danger to the state, we shall not fail to advise you. For you know well that we can undertake no serious action without coming to you for your ratification. Some assurance I did gather from the cautious promises of the old high priest, even though I suspected that his long-winded utterances were a veil to secret purposes of his own. In any case, I resolved not to rely on him, and not to relinquish my direct participation in the affair. Here Pan Wiadomski suspended the narrative of his experiences as Syliarch of the Antonia fortress in the time of Pontius Pilate, which he dictated to me partly from memory and partly from notes, and which I transcribed word for word during the winter of that year. The interruption in our meetings was due to causes over which I had no control. End of part 1.